Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week we're going to put a bow on what was the longest YouTube LP that I've ever done, the most episodes I've ever done, including one that had the longest single episode that I've ever done. So I wouldn't end up being shocked if this ends up being the longest podcast I've ever done either. And it's Persona 5 Royal. Now, to start off with this, the way I'm going to have to process all of this game is I'm going to have to compartmentalize a lot of it. The only way I'm going to have to do this is kind of do what I did with Chrono Cross last time out, but with a emphasis on point-by-point retelling of the plot through the characters as they appear, because that's the only way to kind of get through each character, because there's a lot of them, and I'm not even going to be able to talk about all of them. But then there's still the battle system, there's the aesthetics, there's what I think is good and bad about the show, or about the game, and then everything else surrounding this game. But suffice it to say, if it wasn't obvious, it is my favorite game of all time, and I kind of have to start there. My favorite game for the longest time was Final Fantasy VII. I've recently gone on to not like it a whole bunch, but it's still one of the best Final Fantasy games, but the story kind of bleh. The more I play it, the more I think the story of Final Fantasy VII bleh. But for like 5 or 10 years, Final Fantasy VII was, I'm not going to get top of this. And then Final Fantasy VI, when I played it and started playing it more, I started to like that more. So Final Fantasy VI took over. But then Persona 3 happened. And then Persona 4 happened. And it was around that time where I was really rigorous when it came to, I'm just really watching anime at this point. I'm really watching or playing JRPGs at this point. And this is introducing me to Japanese culture, which I'm big into now. But at the time, I was kind of just developing. And Persona was like the last bastion of, these are the games we still want. Because Final Fantasy was switching over to action-based stuff like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy 12 and 13 later. Bleh. Persona stayed the course, because what happened with Persona was SMT started first in the late 80s. Persona didn't start as a franchise until late 90s, 1997, 1998. And the first two games were standard dungeon crawls. I think they're fine to an extent because it has a duology. It kind of focuses on social link stuff, but not really. It wasn't until Persona 3 where the real key to Persona's success, and the reason that people think of Persona when they think of this franchise and not SMT, because, again, I've said this in the SMT5 review, SMT5 is about getting an aura of a world that is uninhabitable and people are running over it, and you're just trying to make a microcosm of what your reason is, what your faith is. Persona is about characters in, Japan specifically, and living your life. And really in Persona 3, they started solidifying the formula that's successful for them. I don't think it hit until Persona 4, but Persona 3 laid the groundwork, and 4 capitalized it. Those two games really are what drove me to becoming who I am today, as far as, like, I'm only playing these types of games, I'm only watching this kind of stuff, and if I branch out, I have to be dragged kicking and screaming by some force. So 3 and 4 were probably the best games for God knows how long. And 4 specifically because it just has a better overall feel to it. And then they waited until 10 years later to make Persona 5. Part of that was disasters in Japan, of course. Part of it was writers' strikes and stuff. But they finally released it in 2017 for the PS4 and PS5, or PS3, PS4, and Royal for PS4 a couple years later. And Persona 5 really solidified the Persona formula, modernizing it so that people who weren't there for Persona 3 and Persona 4 could get into this, and it became their biggest seller. Again, I don't want to get into the SMT versus Persona thing because that's a dumb argument. You should be happy that both games are successful. If Persona is more successful, so what? But Persona 5 is the one that people know because it is on the modern console, and we live in an age of streaming and YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that. So Persona 5 is easily accessible. And Persona 5 does what Persona 4 didn't. It basically takes music and visual design and weaves it into the story narrative, not as a, like, this is a rhythm game masked as a RPG. No, this is, they take the visual design and make it work in the context of the game itself. Now, that's really tricky, but that's one of the reasons that it excels. It also excels because it takes the Persona 4 staples of social links and stuff and makes them stronger by giving you more of them, giving you a lot more to do, but also not feeling like you're stuck. And this is something that they learned from Persona 3 to 4, was getting stuck in kind of the gooey, because Persona 3, as much as I like it, feels really gooey in comparison to 5. It's really stiff. But again, it's only as good as the characters presented. And Persona 5, I don't think, has the best team. Persona 4, again, beats it out. But Persona 5 is still very strong in that regard. I think what Persona 5 represents is the strongest overall Persona game. If you're going to play any of the three, it'd probably be this one. For everything working. Everything works. Persona 4, to a lesser extent, because, I mean, it's on Steam now, but it was on PS2, so it's harder to get access to. And, of course, Persona 3. But hey, eventually they'll re-release them, and then Persona 3 and 4 will get their day again. And I will be happy about that. But if I have to talk about Persona 5, the only way I'm going to do this is to get to the meat of it. And that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go spoiler heavy because, let's face it, I've streamed this on Twitch twice. One for the original, one for Royal. I played 206 episodes on YouTube of this game. I'm spoiling everything, and if you don't know this game by now, I'm not gonna sugarcoat a damn thing, because the expectation is I've played this more than almost any game other than Miku or some of the Final Fantasy games. I can't talk about this game without spoiling it, so bear that in mind. Anyway, so we start the game in a casino, and Joker, voiced by Xander Mobus, gets this treasure that he's escaping with his team, and he escapes. Gets caught by a police force that they weren't expecting, and gets incarcerated and sent to live with some guy named Sojiro, voiced by Jameson Price. Jameson Price is great. I talked about Mary Elizabeth McGlynn being my favorite voice actor overall. I'd say male voice actors, Jameson Price has that really good, stern, but effectual voice. Like, you hear it in Sojiro, and you hear it in the other games that he's done. Like, he just has that booming voice, and it's very authoritative. So Sojiro is basically saying, I don't want you here, but I was paid for it, so you're going to live here for a year. So most Persona games do the whole live here for a year, do social link crap, do the storyline crap, and then you're free to go. So you have a year to putz around in this attic. What sets this apart, and is very similar to Persona 3 and 4 again, is the other world concept. 3 had Tartarus, a giant fuck-off tower, which sucks balls because it's just a tower of endless fights. 4 is better because it has actual dungeons, but in reality, they're just the same as Tartarus, just colored differently and music differently. 5 really gives you palaces. And it gives you the palaces in the form of the metaverse. So Joker gets accosted one day. He's going to school on his first day. Tries to meet a girl. They nod. They say hi. He goes his very way. Some dork in a school uniform named Ryuji shows up. Ryuji, voiced by Max Middleman, who was in like Tales of Berseria. He's Red 13 in Final Fantasy VII Remake, stuff like that. So Ryuji and Joker try to go to school, find himself in a alternate version of the school, and all that shit happens. They meet Morgana, voiced by Cassandra Lee Morris, Taiga from Toradora, Cube from Madoka Magica, that sort of thing. This little cat player character, and this cat's just saying, "Get the fuck out of here! Get me the fuck out of here!" So yes, it can talk. It can talk. So a talking cat, because mascot character, they find their way out of it. They end up getting involved with Anne. I'm going to say Anne just because the pronunciation in the English version is weird, but Anne Takamaki, or Takamaki. I'm going to say Takamaki, I suppose. And Takamaki is voiced by Erika Harlocker, who was Kyoko in Danganronpa. Yumiko in Kakegurui. Oh my god, I can't wait to review that mess. But Anne's a model. She was meeting Joker, ends up going into this guy's car. He ends up being a teacher, Kamoshida. He is the ruler of a castle. So machinations happen, a few days happen. One of the weird things about Persona 5 Royal and Persona in general is a very slow process. It takes like 5 or 6 hours to actually get to combat. One of the things that drove me nuts was whenever I saw a streamer, like if they're not used to the visual novel aspect of Persona, it would drive them nuts. They would say, well, where's the combat? Where's the gameplay? Where's the, and multiple streamers said the same thing. Like, I get it, but this is a slow burn type of game more so than a Final Fantasy. And it's a quicker start than even Persona 4 was, but Persona 3 to an extent is better. But again, they all start slow. But they're building the characters. And they're building stuff with Kamoshida as this pervy teacher. But really what ends up happening is a character known as Shiho is kicked off the team, and then she decides to jump off the roof of the school building, trying to commit suicide. Joker and Ryuji go after Kamoshida. That shit happens. They end up recruiting Anne and Morgana, and the four of them stop Kamoshida. So, quick things go ahead, but Kamoshida is the first palace. It's an introductory palace, and I'll go over, like, the gameplay aspects later, but they end up meeting Yusuke, and he is getting... Yusuke is Matt Mercer from Critical Role. Perfect casting, by the way. Just this down-and-out artist guy who's being plagiarized by this art mogul for money. And Yusuke has this thing for Anne, and it's played for laughs, which is kind of sad because you go through this whole thing in the first game, or in the first dungeon about perv nature and trying this. And the way to get to Yusuke and get to Madarame is to strip for him, which is played for laughs about 5 hours later. I've seen some issues with that, and it is, but it is part of the narrative. But the issue I find with that second part is once you get past Anne, she really takes the focus in the first dungeon. After that, like, she doesn't get jack shit to do. She gets this cutscene where she strips for Yusuke, sort of, and then kind of nothing. And then Yusuke's thing happens, and he, awakens to his persona, and we get Yusuke. So I'm moving along. You see where I'm going with this. But the second dungeon's fine, but it doesn't have the same fervor. But we get it back. We get it back because Makoto, voiced by Jeremy Lee, who I met at a convention a couple of weeks ago. Jeremy Lee was Asuna and Sword Art Online, but this is what I know her most from, and I like this character a lot. Makoto is a student council president. She's the awesome girl with awesome grades and always does what she's told because her sister, Sai, voiced by Elizabeth Maxwell, is just, I own you, sort of, because I'm the leader of this family because our parents died or whatever. Just do what I say. Just get into a good college. Just do it, So they get a run with the mob, and Makoto's trying to do her thing and trying to spy on, like, the characters because the principal's telling them to, they're building anticipation of who gets revealed at the end, but the principal's trying to get Makoto to do this thing, Sai's trying to get her to do this thing. This guy named as Akechi comes in, kind of browbeats her and says, nope, so this shit's gonna happen. So Makoto gets sick of it. She got caught by Kanashiro, this mobster guy, and they get taken to this bank. And she's had enough. And the best scene in the entire game is Makoto and Jeremy Lee's portrayal of this, just stamping on the fucking ground and just getting pissed off and awakening her inner, like, I'm an Aikido expert, I'm gonna kick the shit out of you. And her persona is the best persona ever. And personas are your, like, inner manifestation of a character, and they look all fancy and fun. And for now, like, you've had people stand up, you've had Arsene Lupin, you've had these pirates, you've had this like femme fatales, you've had Zoro. Makoto gets a fucking motorcycle. A motorcycle to ride as a persona. Johanna. Pope Joan or Johanna. She's a fucking motorcycle. And she nukes everything. And she basically beats the shit out of dudes. And if you're wondering who my favorite character is, it's between one or two. And definitely Makoto as far as, like, long term. So yes, Makoto is my favorite character. So shut up. Anyway, so Makoto's dungeon happens, and they foil, like, a bank heist. It's starting to feel like the Phantom Thief thing. The fourth dungeon is where things start to work, and I think the people, like, overall, the strength of the game really lies because it's the storytelling of the characters, and they haven't really gone super dark yet, but they really do now. And I think a lot of people's favorite character overall, and the one I dated in this playthrough on YouTube, was Futaba, voiced by Erica Lindbeck. Jessie from Final Fantasy VII Remake and stuff like that. So Futaba is a neat, but she's a neat... have I explained what neats are? I don't think I have. A neat, for people unaware, is people who are shut-ins, but in an extreme situation, like very extreme. It's usually played for laughs in games and anime, just because it's a bad trope. But in this game, it's not played for laughs at all. Some of her dialogue later is, because it's all gamer speak and D&D speak and shit, which is funny, but as a character, she's not played for laughs at all. And the reasoning is because the characters we don't know yet caused her mother to run out in front of a car and kill herself. And Futaba is blamed for it. These guys come by and say, you're the cause of it, and you've done this, and she just mentally fucking shuts down. So the party, unbeknownst to all this other shit that's going on, has to save her because she can help them out and whatever. So Sai's interrogating Joker this whole time, is thinking, why aren't you going after Medjet? Excuse me, little cough and hiccup there. Well, they were busy with Futaba, and I don't like their dungeon so much, but everything surrounding Futaba and her dungeon and all the setup is one of the stronger points in the game, and is really where a lot of people like it. I think the first dungeon is the best, but 4 is certainly pretty good. I have gotten used to the 5th character more as a favorite, though, because once you get Futaba, you get kind of this break, and one of the now that I think about it, I'll add that to my negatives. Stuff with Futaba is fun, but it kind of just gets weird, where once you add Futaba in, they go in a weird forceful, hey, let's make Futaba open up to us. And yeah, I'll add that for later. I just thought of it. I knew that was something I hated, but I'll get to it later. But suffice it to say, once Futaba joins the party, she lightens the mood a little bit. She's got a little rivalry with Yusuke a bit, but a lot of the characters kind of just sit there and wait for the next character to join them. That's kind of the vibe of this game, is you get one character, then you get another character, then you get another character, and a lot of the other ones kind of, outside of Makoto, and Morgana, they don't really add much. And Joker, being a silent protagonist, aka Dorkface, can only add so much. But again, Joker is Joker, and he's the protagonist, so of course he's important. But the story at least gives you something. Joker's been incarcerated. Joker's in probation, so at least he has some reason for doing the things he does. But again, Makoto and Morgana are kind of the story drivers, mostly Morgana in an extent. But we get another character known as Haru Okumura, voiced by Xanthi Wynn, who was in Black Rock Shooter. She's been in stuff like East 8, whatnot. This was the game I knew her mostly from. And she's like prim and proper and stuff like that. But she has this weird, arranged marriage that isn't really an arranged marriage, but she's also like a commodity. Like her dad owns this fucking burger chain and wants to be a politician. So much so that he's pawning off Haru to this absolutely deplorable piece of shit. And they actually show physical abuse and almost sexual abuse. And I know that people don't really like the quick nature of Haru getting introduced. And, oh my god, she's part of the party now. They do what they can with that. They show off the fact that this guy's an absolute piece of shit. They show off that she's nothing but a piece of meat as far as her father's concerned. And it's very strong to me. And I think Haru doesn't get a lot of credit as a character because she's not like Futaba, like she owns the scenery, she chooses the scenery. No, that's not her job. Her job is to be the nice girl in a land of crazies because Ryuji's a dumb fuck, Dorkface is Dorkface, and doesn't really do anything. And outside of Makoto and Morgana, I mean, Yusuke's there, but you need somebody to balance out the stupid sometimes. And Haru fits the, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, and I'm just there to have fun, and you guys are nice, and we're friends. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think in later games and other supplemental material, Haru actually gets a lot more characterization, and I've liked her way more and more. In game, she's probably weaker than Makoto, but as far as characters that I think I like Haru the most. So bear that in mind. I like the nice girl every once in a while when it's done well, because everybody else is usually 50 flavors of stupid. So really, it's a tie between Makoto and Haru for me. If you're asking, or if you're wondering, not that I haven't made it a secret whenever I play Persona 5 Dancing, because every time I mention it, I say Makoto and Haru are the best. Anyway, so they get through 5th dungeon. Haru's father gets shot and killed the same way that Futaba's. Well, similar but different. So what happened was they've been trying to not kill the person, the shadow that they've been fighting as bosses. If you do kill them, then the person suffers a mental shutdown. So that's that explanation. And they do over-explain things a little bit. This is a 120-hour game, so they have to explain it. Makoto's sister gets tasked with stopping the party and arresting the Phantom Thieves, so she gets her own dungeon. And as far as dungeons go, this is my favorite because it's a casino, and I love casino ephemera, and the music involved with this, called The Winds of Fate, just so good. I remember on the YouTube playthrough, like, I just sat there for like one whole run of the 3-minute song, just bobbing my head back and forth listening to the fucking thing. And it's like, yeah, I'm into this, because the last few dungeons have been kind of bleh since the first one. I mean, 4 is fine because of the story, but 6 is like, you've got a character I like as the boss, you've got a story that I can follow, you've got a setup of this casino which has all this ephemera in it, and the casino, like, as long as you're not like a gambler, casinos are fun to look at, and the allure of the casino is better than an actual casino. But anyway, as a stage, it was great. But the music, it's the music. This music, and then Sai, because what Sai does is counteract Makoto's, because Makoto, her whole thing was she was pushed and pushed and pushed to the brink of just being angry. Sai does so in the best way possible. She comes off as this femme fatale owner of this casino, but in reality, she's a woman with this just rage, and she tries to kill people with a fucking chainsaw. Like, so Sai is very memorable and fun. And she's killed me. Not in this playthrough, but she's done it before, so yes. Anyway, so level 6 is my favorite. But all the while, once you get through this, the game kind of goes to the present. Because one of the weird things Persona 5 does is it plays from a flashback perspective. Joker's already been caught in level 6 in the casino, and we're just reliving the cases because Sai is telling us all these things. So she's trying to browbeat him and just say, I'm trying to learn what the fuck this metaverse is. I'm trying to learn why you're doing everything you're doing. And it turns out to all be a plot in 2 different ways. And the main villains that have been causing all this fucking problem, for Futaba, for Makoto, for Haru, for everybody, all boils down to 2 specific people. Masayoshi Shido, voiced by Keith Silverstein, and Goro Akechi, who is Robbie Damon. And Robbie was Prompto in Final Fantasy 15. Keith Silverstein's been in stuff like other SMT games, and he was one of the main characters of Zero Time Dilemma, if anybody's heard of that. Great villain voice, so he's perfect as this guy who looks like fucking David Draymond from Disturbed or something. You know, he's got that like soul patch mustache looking thing. Anyway, so Masayoshi Shido is a politician who's trying to become prime minister, and he uses Akechi, who's been kind of intermittently just fucking with Joker and the rest of the party in a, detective role. And Akechi was in the 6th dungeon as a party member, and it turns out it was a ploy all along to get them stuck. So Joker was stuck in this interrogation room. Akechi was asked, hey, I'm going to shoot you because Shido wanted me to. And it's weird because it's one of those mysteries where Shido isn't really he's revealed, but he's not really like given a shit ton of screen time until that, and then after the fact he is owning the scenery as one of the main villains. So Akechi's the guy that you're always kind of after and thinking he's the mastermind, but he's still involved. They play it strange because you're trying to redeem Akechi somehow, but you're not really. Like, you can't redeem this fucking guy at all. He is a prick. He is Light Yagami from Death Note. That's basically what Goro Akechi is. So he comes up with this plan to shoot Joker. But how do we survive this? He's in a fucking detention facility, and he's shot the guard, and he's, Sai got away. But it turned out to be an interesting plot. The way they got around this was amazing. And I've said about this, the metaverse. So the metaverse is this separate reality, and they're cognitive beings. As long as you don't kill the owner of a metaverse palace or metaverse creation. So, like, say if Sai was defeated, but they killed her, Sai would die. But if they try to kill a cognitive being of like say she knew a cognitive version of Akechi or something, if they killed Akechi in the palace, he would still be fine and none the wiser because he's not the owner of the palace. It's not his head or his heart, that they're attacking. It's only the owner of it. So their plan, and this was genius, and they actually go over the fact, and that's, I appreciate the fact that they spend time going over this. So their plan was to get arrested and let Joker get shot inside Sai's palace. So Futaba dicked around with Akechi's phone in an earlier cutscene. Joker's whole game in this entire flashback interrogation sequence thing was to try and get Sai's trust and say, show him the phone. We know this guy is evil and shit. Of all the obtuse things, it was some random conversation 6 months ago. How they called back to it, I have no idea. How they planned it, I have no idea, but it is pretty fucking genius and weird in its execution. So Sai shows him the phone. By doing that, she's effectively stayed inside her palace. So they take her into Sai's palace because they hadn't destroyed it yet. In all other instances, the palaces were destroyed, except that one. They planned it specifically so it didn't. So the person that they ended up shooting was not Joker, but a cognitive version. And as I've said, if you destroy a cognitive being who is not the owner of a palace, the real person doesn't suffer a shutdown. So Joker gets shot and just fades away. And then in reality, Sai is able to let Joker escape, and for the next month or so, just stays away. So Shido is trying to run for prime minister and almost succeeds, but the party, finagles it, and they fight Akechi and all that stuff. And it turns out, we're not done yet. So in the original Persona 5 Persona 5 game, you have this character in this, metaphysical area that's not the metaverse. It's called the Velvet Room. In every other game, there's a character known as Igor. And in most cases recently, they've had characters act as attendants who get more screen time and do more fun stuff. Igor is there to fuse personas and shit, which I'll go over. But he's there. He's this long-nosed guy, talks funny, and he's always just a nice guy. And something about his voice in this version, I'm guessing because they couldn't get the original voice actor from 3 and 4, they changed the voice actor, but there was a reason for that. So his velvet attendants are Caroline and Justine, these little 10-year-old girls that are calling him a piece of shit and trying to swat him with a baton and shit. So throughout the game, Igor is helping in game, and Caroline and Justine are asking him to do stuff. They even get social links based on themselves, and you get to learn about them, and they're doing stuff, and it turns out that something's not right, because this thing known as the Holy Grail seems to be the cause of everything going on, and it seems to be this kind of weird game that's been going on. So Igor ends up realizing that Joker's onto him, and it wasn't Igor this whole time. Caroline and Justine didn't figure that out until that exact moment. They were going to kick the shit out of Joker and kill him, but they actually ended up fusing. So they used the fusion mechanic in-game, in cutscene, to meld these two specific personalities back into one, into the real Velvet Attendant known as Lavenza. And she reveals that Igor is not real, and is instead the Holy Grail himself, known as Yaldabaoth. I can't believe I said that with a straight face. Yaldabaoth. And he's the final boss of the original game. And he's trying to get Joker to say, just redo the world. We'll redo everything. And he says no. So Lavenza takes possession of the Velvet Room again. The real Igor comes back. And Igor doesn't really do much, which is unfortunate. I think one of the weird things with Persona is they focused more on the Velvet Attendants, which makes sense because each game has a different one. But Igor's presence doesn't seem as vital anymore, but he's there as a hanger-on. In this game, he's played as a villain this time, which I think is the logical endpoint. I don't know how much more you can do with Igor. Even in Persona 5 Strikers, he wasn't even there. They had Lavenza there. In most of the spin-off titles, Igor's never there. It's Elizabeth or Margaret or Marie or whomever, They have taken the brunt of the characters. It's a stylistic choice, and I think I would like that. I think Igor is cool and all, but this is probably the last point you can do with him, is turn him into a villain by accident. But Yaldabaoth tries to merge the worlds together and get rid of the Phantom Thieves by making them not exist. They do exist, though, and this whole concept is public. The whole idea is Yaldabaoth is trying to say that the public doesn't wish for the world that the Phantom Thieves have created. So the Phantom Thieves don't need to exist. And then it turns out that they do. The world realizes that the world has gone to shit because now it looks like a fucking Castlevania scene. Like a fucking cemetery. Out of nowhere. And the Phantom Thieves have to stop him. And they do. But we're not done yet. We're not done yet because in Persona 5 Royal, they introduce 2 other characters and they have more. So Persona 5 Royal tacks on another 20-some hours of work. Throughout the game, and this is really well done, whether it be Catherine Full Body, the second version of Catherine, or this game, subtly weaved into the narrative are extra like dialogues and then extra scenes interspersed into the story with this character known as Kasumi, voiced by Laura Post. She's just this awesome gymnast who's trying to be like a national athlete, go to the Olympics kind of thing, and her grades are starting to slip because she's focusing so much on that, and they're trying to take up her honor status because the principals don't say, well, 3rd place isn't good enough, we need her to be 1st place. That's bullshit. All the while, she's aided by a school counselor known as Dr. Maruki, and Maruki's voiced by Billy Kametz, who was in Rising of Shield Hero and Cells at Work and stuff like that. So you got 2 new characters kind of doing stuff, and they're really nice. Kasumi's played as this super nice girl who's like appreciative of dork face always helping her out in certain situations. So she gets a crush on him. Because of course she does. I really felt bad in my playthrough because I had to turn her down because I was focusing on Futaba. Because I'm not some harem-chasing nerd. Maruki is super nice as well, and that's the weird thing. When you realize what's going on after the fact, if you chase this storyline, this Persona 5 Royal content, what ends up happening is Akechi gets more social link time, so you actually talk to him more. If you level him up all the way, if you talk to Maruki about his research in, cognitive science and stuff, and then you help Kasumi, and they all level up, you unlock the Persona 5 Royal content and the final dungeon. And it turns out that Dr. Maruki himself took what Yaldabaoth created and remade the world to suit everyone's yearnings. Futaba and Haru got their parents back. Anne got Shiho back to full strength. Ryuji got, recognized for his track, whatever. Yusuke is going to be popular. Morgana became human because he wanted to bang Anne, I guess. For some reason, Morgana decided to become human and then sleep in Joker's bed, too. That was strange. But a lot of strange things keep happening, and it turns out Dr. Maruki was involved. And it's really played well because Maruki himself is not a villain. He's a villain only by circumstance. His whole motivation is trying to have people escape the pains that they think they don't need. And he's able to recreate cognition to the point where everybody in existence gets to have a great life. No concept of pain, no concept of worrying about your dreams. Like he'll make sure everything works. It's sort of brainwashing, but not really. Like he wants people to accept this. And that's where the issue lies, is that everybody in the game doesn't want to accept it because they've lived their lives with their choices for now. And Akechi even says the same thing. Akechi realizes that if he lives in the real world, well, he dies in the original game. If Joker doesn't take the offer, he's incarcerated for all the shit that he did. So they have to decide, do they want to go back to the way things were? And they do. Japan has this thing with a lot of these JRPG narratives where they don't like being kowtowed to. Like Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy 13 specifically are good about the whole fatalism and destiny thing and saying, no, we'll control our own fucking destiny, thank you very much. And again, this isn't like a god telling you your hand over fist. That's what Yaldabaoth was doing. Maruki's whole thing was he saw what Kasumi went through. He saw what his girlfriend Rumi went through, and he ended up having the power to change their fate and basically do away with whatever pain they had and rewrite their cognition. Because it turns out that Kasumi is not Kasumi at all, but instead Sumire. And the only reason that Kasumi is there anymore is because Sumire was saved from a car accident. Kasumi herself passed away, and Sumire was just shot down. And Maruki found a way to basically well, she said it first, so it's not like he convinced her, but he knew that he had the power to have her think that she was Kasumi and change her idea into Kasumi. And the way that works for everybody else, and they've gone over this in game a little bit, is anytime she hears the name Sumire, it's actually blotted out or silenced or whatever. She cannot hear her original name. Everybody's trying to tell her she's Sumire, and everybody's talking about her like she's Sumire, but she thinks she's Kasumi. And it catches everybody off guard except Akechi, who's only met her like once or twice. So the finale is, 10 to 15 extra hours of work and fun stuff to be had. But all told, it's a story about choosing one's place against authority and rebelling against authority and saying, just because you're an adult doesn't mean you get to decide everything. And just because you think you know better because you've lived longer, or you have a thing, or you're a god, or you have a god complex or something, or just because you've seen us have struggles, that doesn't mean you can just choose to browbeat us into submission. So the characters, for better or for worse, are trying to rebel against everything that's going on. So you get help and you get to work around it. So that's the general gist of the plot. And again, characters get a lot to work with. Characters do a ton, but it's only as good as the battle system. So, what are the battles? Turn-based, yay! My favorite. Because I get to think through things without it being super slow like a strategy RPG. Or a tactics RPG, that sort of thing. So turn-based, but it does this sort of Final Fantasy X kind of thing where everything feels like really snappy. Like you press a button and the HUD in game just snaps to action. You choose a persona, it automatically chooses a persona that you're weak to, that the enemy's weak to. So SMT and persona are all about switching personas and switching demons and all this stuff, interrogating demons to get them on your side. And the demon interrogation and stuff has been a staple for 10 to 15 games now. They brought it back in Persona 5, because in 3 and 4 it didn't exist, but in 5 you get these like little comedic moments or angry moments with the personas, and you get to kind of learn about them. And it also happens too in SMT 5, because it gives the personas and the demons characters to work around a little bit, because you have enough main characters as it is. How do you find characterization in these new characters? Just little quips here and there, and they all feel different. You can kind of navigate persona interrogation. When you get them, you get new personas. Igor and Caroline and Justine and Lavenza are tasked with fusing them into stronger personas, and your whole job is to kind of mix and match elemental affinities and weaknesses so that you're strong against the thing, because the last thing you want to do is get blasted by an enemy and have them get extra turns, because the persona system is you attack a weakness, you get an extra turn, you get attacked, they get an extra turn. And the way that Persona 3 and through 5 have operated, if your main character dies, if Dorkface goes down, face down, you can't revive him and the game's over. It's a weird mechanic. I don't know if I like it. But, again, you have a lot of different ways to get around this. You have, like, instant death protection. Futaba has a shit ton of extra shit that she can do, even compared to Persona 5 proper, that she can just, like, Here's extra HP. Here's fucking Heat Riser, which is a full-on buff to every stat. Characters can just knock them out of the way and withstand an attack for you. So you've got ways of balancing out the fact, oh shit, I just got nuked. Or, oh shit, I just got insta-death out of nowhere. But it's still, if you're not prepared for the enemies, I made it look silly because I had an end-game persona that would basically nullified everything. But in-game, Persona 5's not the hardest, but you can still get wrecked out of nowhere by not preparing well. The whole game is about checking the boss, seeing what they've got, and then probably getting wrecked a time or two, and then realizing, oh, they do this thing, so I've got to prep this thing. And that's true for enemies as well, because you never know when a super enemy that's 5 or 10 levels ahead of everybody else in the groupings can come and nuke your ass. So they got these things known as baton passes that can, like, you power up the next attack for a party member, or they can help yours. And they'll even tell you, like, if an enemy character is weak to a certain character, so you use the baton pass to them so that they could strike the... that was like one of the things in the Maruki final boss was use this weakness against that thing, and then use that weakness against this thing, and you baton pass and baton pass and baton pass. I'm not a huge fan of the baton passes, but the fact that you have that as a just quick swap to a next character is really sweet. Because a lot of people don't like turn-based combat. I personally do. But what I like most is Final Fantasy X. I've said forever that Final Fantasy X is my favorite battle system, because you can quick swap all 7 characters, and outside of Kamari, who's basically just a secondary version of somebody else, everybody has a strength and affinity against a certain enemy, and you can quick swap, and you can attack, and then you can kind of tic-tac-toe your way to beat an enemy, and it all feels really fucking snappy. This game is the same idea with the battle system, so it's very snappy. They've got all these things that just work so well and quicken the pace. It doesn't even feel like a turn-based battle system, but it's still turn-based, so you don't have to, like, force yourself into an ATB or an action-based economy if you don't want to. You can take your time and say, okay, I need to heal, or I need to do this with my turn. You get to learn everybody's little nuances and build your characters the way you want to build them. Persona 5 does a thing now where you can... And this was a welcome change after Persona 4. It started with Persona 4 Golden for the PSP, where now you can select persona skills. For a while, it was you would just randomly select from a fucking toggle, and it would take like 5 or 10 minutes to actually get the things you wanted. Now you can select the skills that you want to inherit from a persona. It makes it so much better. So now you can decide... this character does this thing, and this character does that thing, and I can switch to that character to attack that guy, but I need that for this guy. I need a full, like, spectrum of weaknesses and affinities to stay the course against these 5 or 10 different monsters. So there's good monster variety and everything. So it's very snappy. It is basically the Final Fantasy X battle system in a Persona game, done that way. Yakuza 7's kind of the same way. Any turn-based battle system that is very snappy but doesn't come across as hackneyed and, like, rushed is my favorite battle system, because the old school turn-based, like the 1, 2, and 3, they can be kind of slow because that's what they were way back when. Even Dragon Quest, to an extent, feels kind of slow. Even now, not as bad, but man, they can be slow in those early games. But I love turn-based battles when they are snappy, because there's less time wasted. Alongside the battles, you have what's known as palaces. I've mentioned this before. Palaces reflect the owner of this current dungeon that you have. So the first one is a castle, because he's the king of the castle and the king of pearls. You've got an art museum for Madarame. You got a bank for Kaneshiro. Futaba's is a tomb. Okumura's is space, like a space station. 6th is the casino, Sai's Casino. My favorite, love it. 7 is a cruise liner in the middle of a sunken city. And the final, well, sort of dungeon is Mementos. You know, the final dungeon, a final with Maruki, is a research facility, like a doctor's research facility kind of thing. And they're all played slightly differently. Some have different mechanics. Some have kind of like you're using gambling against them, or you're just cutting off laser systems like a bank heist. I know in Futaba's thing, you're trying to shoot out these areas to create new paths for these light fixtures to open up new areas. Shido's whole thing is you're a rat and you're going through these light puzzles to try and turn them off so you're not rats anymore. You know, some mechanics are better than others, yes. Maruki's even had an interesting little like exam, like a mental puzzle exam, like to determine like if you're gonna fight a dude, you choose this option. It's like a mental test, like a test of your like morals. It's like if you had the power to steal a thing, you would not steal anything. You would steal just enough. You would steal everything. You would steal people's hearts. You would steal the one that you love, you know, that sort of thing. So these moral quandaries. And then it would decide based on what you thought Maruki would think, how you would, how he would respond. And if you responded correctly, you could pass on. If you didn't, you'd fight a hard enemy, that sort of thing. So every palace has its own mechanics. Another cool thing is because it is an actual dungeon instead of just a palette swapped, randomly generated dungeon, you're able to do a lot of like parkour-esque things. And Persona 5 really plays into the whole Phantom Thief thing by giving you, hey, I jumped on this chandelier and I jumped over to this railings to get over these parts of the doorway to unlock a key to get to the next thing. And then I used detective vision or assassin vision to just check into, oh, there's a path to this key that I need to follow, and I gotta check these fucking, all sorts of these little things. And all these little contextual buttons that give you stuff to do during a dungeon that isn't just, hey, go fight a dude. That was the main drawback, I thought, with 3 and 4, was the dungeons were just, hey, here's 10 levels, they all look the same, they all feel the same, here's some enemies, go up there. It's fine, but Persona 5 really took the time to make everything feel like an actual level. But they didn't just shy away from it. An in-game grind spot known as Mementos, which, again, is like the final dungeon of Persona 5 Vanilla, is this like 100-story fucking mini dungeon shit where Morgana turns into a cat truck or something, like a van. He turns into a van. I think it's like a reference to My Neighbor Totoro or something. So Morgana is driving you down this fucking pit of despair that is everybody's subconscious, and you can do these like side quests and things. So it's basically Tartarus from Persona 3, or those like, here's a 200 floor dungeon that is nothing but palette swaps and randomly generated stuff. It's boring, but at least they have it. You don't have to go it down all the time. You can go piece by piece as you go through the main story. So I do like the fact that they at least tied it into the narrative at the end and made it worthwhile to go down there, because I don't really like that sort of thing. But what I do like, and what I enjoy most about social links, is the fact that it feels like a dating sim or a visual novel. Social links are the reason that Persona is such an important thing for me. I'm not really a visual novel guy, but weaving a JRPG into a dating sim is kind of cool. Because not only do all of your main characters, and this has been a thing since Persona 4, all of your main characters have their own social links where you get to talk to them about things. But they also level up based on how high their rank is. So they get skills like, hey, avoid instant death, or you get like one of Ryuji's things is if you're 10 levels ahead of a monster, they instantly die, that sort of thing. So everybody's got their own unique little mechanics, or they've got this base set of improvements they can do, like knock out a status effect, or you name it. Everybody gets a little something, but you have like 10 or 15 other social links. Your teacher who what do they call it? Highlights or nightlights as a maid, that thing. Like, so she is your teacher by day, but at night she is a pervy maid because extortion money. You've got this girl who's winning all these matches in shogi, which is Japanese chess, because her mom is like fixing matches, that sort of thing. And you're trying to stop that from happening. You've got this fortune teller who's being a scam artist. You've got all these fun little things going on, and everybody has their own stories. And it's the usage of time. It's the usage of time where if you're not in a dungeon, you're doing social link stuff. You're building your character. You're building your day-to-day stats. It's a bit cumbersome because you don't have as much time as you think you do, but like during the day, you can build your stats by answering a question in school. You can take an exam, and build your stats that way, build up your charm. But your stats are based on how smart you are. So you have to build your academics to be smart enough to do that. But you also need your academics to be high enough so you can talk to Makoto, because Makoto doesn't have time for stupid people. So all these little things. You can take side jobs that can unlock certain social links. You can take training to buff your HP or SP. You can do all these fun little things. And it takes a playthrough or two to get used to it. If you're used to that thing, it's fine. I don't like the fact that they block off people based on certain stats, especially like if it's the start of a social link, I'm okay with it, sort of. But midway through a storyline, say if you're focusing on Makoto all this time, you already have your academics high enough so that she's not going to call you stupid. But later on, to open up the meat of her social link, you need the charm to withstand this host dude who is basically this like impossibly pretty just scam host guy, like the impossibly pretty dudes you see on TV all the time, that sort of thing. And he's basically fucking over this girl, so that she would sell her body, at his club, that sort of thing. It's annoying because it could be a different stat than the one you're focusing on to start a social link. So in that regard, I like the fact that everything ties together, but at times there are little bits and pieces of the social link mechanics that you're spending so much time trying to get social links because you can't do all the social links all in one playthrough. I didn't even finish. I specifically had like 2 or 3 social links that I knew I just didn't want to do. But again, everybody has their own specific like benefits. Kawakami, the best social link. The maid lady, she'll give you an extra bit of time during school where you can slack off and build infiltration tools, or you can study, or you can read a magazine to build another stat for a different reason. Later on, she'll even fuck around with the other teacher, so you get even more time with that. But her end game buff is so crazy because, say, if you go into Mementos or a palace, you can ask her to give you a massage. I'm not making that up. A massage to wash away the fact that you're tired so that you can do stuff that same night. It is a broken skill and I love it. And of course it's fun because it's a maid giving you a massage and telling you you're so stiff. It's his back, not his dick. Anyway, but what's weird is having Morgana stare at him while she does it. I don't know. That guy's a bit of a... Morgana just sits there and will always, like, in the wrong time, always just be like, oh, hey, you're getting a massage from a masseuse, like, kinky maid who's also your teacher? Fine, I'll watch. But then we'll decide if you're on a date, we'll just nope out. Like, dude, go away. It's like Morgana is your spirit animal, or the angel and devil on your shoulder. He won't go away. And yes, I know the trope. He's the kitty that always tells you to go to sleep. I know it's annoying, but again, like every social link is different. So one of the lesser social links, the ones I didn't focus on, was a dude who will buff your XP if you're not in the main party. Another one is you have better negotiation skills during demon negotiations. So everything has a place. Much less just learning about the characters. You're doing it for a in-game reason. Oh, excuse me. So they were able to give every social link a reason to exist because it tied somehow into an in-game mechanic. It's a bit overblown and a bit overdone because there's so many goddamn things, but I like the fact that they made the attempt to do it. It's not for everybody. The social link mechanic, the time usage mechanic, you only have like 3 or 4 different spots during a day, and most of it is done in Palace. Or when you're in a storyline, they won't let you do social link stuff because of story plot, because they want to focus on plot. It's arbitrary when the game decides to let you yank on the choke chain or just let it loose. So some people aren't a fan of the social link mechanic. I understand it. But for me, social links are the reason Persona succeeds. Without it, you have a JRPG. And it's a fun JRPG, and like I said, it's got a great mechanic and great battles and all that stuff, and great story. But I like the fact that you have this downtime to build to everything else that builds up your stat base or builds up stuff for Persona Fusion. Fusing stats to do better stats, but you get better stats by doing things outside of Personas. Like every social link gives you a higher XP boost when you fuse a persona, when you fuse better skills and all this shit. You can use social links to get cards and all this stuff. You can talk to Caroline and Justine to get new cards for Persona stuff. It's crazy just how much stuff is packed into this game. Yes, it sounds like a lot because it is a lot of fucking stuff. I had to play through it 120 hours, and there was some stuff I forgot. By design, because not every social link is great, but Kawakami's social link is fucking amazing. Futaba's is great in a strange comedic way. You've got Caroline and Justine, who has an in-game purpose to do that storyline. You have Kasumi, Maruki, and Akechi, who unlock other things. You got Morgana's, which is laced throughout the story, so you don't have to focus on him so much. Everybody has a thing. And even with that, you can tell I'm gushing. It's probably been an hour already, and I'm not even halfway done, I don't think. But what sets Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal ahead of even Persona 4, not just is the gameplay mechanics and the storyline mechanics, because I think Persona 4 is the best well-rounded when it comes to characters. They feel like characters. So, I don't think Persona 4 is great in the gameplay side of things because it's still in that PlayStation 2 era, kind of gooey, kind of stiff. The music is fine, but Persona 3 was kind of when it comes to music, Persona 3 was trying to be darker and kind of popish, dark acid pop stuff. It was fine, but nothing really memorable except for the final boss theme or the Burn My Dread theme, which is cool. Persona 4 a little bit better. You had character specific, dungeons and better battle themes, and you didn't have, Persona 3's battle theme with baby, it's just over and over. It's fucking earworm. It's terrible. Persona 4 is less so because Reach Out for the Truth is pretty good. 4 has good music and good stuff, but 5 just keyed into the style. I've said before, the main characters are phantom thieves. All of the music in this game feels like a heist movie. And especially all the main stuff. All of the dungeons sound distinct and different. Some of them are more subdued. Some of them are more driving. Some of them are more fanciful and fun. Winds of Fate, I think, is fun because it's not so much a driving theme, but is a bouncy, you're in a high-end casino and it's loud and bombastic, but it's got this jazz vibe to it. Or Dr. Maruki's is just very soft and mysterious and kind of foreboding, but it's all catchy in its own way, and it feels good because Shoji Meguro specifically designed it all to sound the same. Everything feels like it should feel. Like every song builds on itself. Everything feels like a 60s like rock track, or feels like a 70s organ is playing in the background. Like it's got acid jazz going on through the whole fucking thing, and it just feels like a heist movie. But when it has to change and do something else, like a harder rock track, like a final boss theme, or even the main boss theme, the Blooming Villain, you've got that. You've got stuff like Beneath the Mask, which is this nice, soft, jazzy thing. A lot of the themes are done by a woman named Lynn. Does a lot of the vocals, and she does a lot of the vocals in English, which is an interesting change. I think that's actually something they focus on in Persona, is a lot of more English-based vocals as opposed to Japanese. There are some songs in Japanese too, but it is different hearing full English in a Japanese game, but it's not like licensed music. It's all pre-made. But Beneath the Mask is you're out and about, you're doing socialing stuff. Life will change as you're going to steal a treasure, and it's like just this, you're amped up to beat this fucking boss's brains in. Rivers in the Desert. I talked about Blooming Villain is the main boss theme, which is really fucking good. But Rivers in the Desert is, I'm facing Shido. Shit got real. I'm facing the final boss, the Holy Grail. Shit got real. They only play Rivers in the Desert 2 or 3 times, but it matters when they do. Again, the palace themes all sound like they should sound. You have the castle theme being this kind of like old school infiltration, almost like Viper Manor from Chrono Cross. You've got an art museum being this kind of like soft, subtle jazz kind of stuff. A bank heist, which is a lot more bombastic. Futaba's, which is very morose, and it's lively but in a depressing sort of way. And again, Whims of Fate is my favorite song because I love that whole aesthetic of going to the casino. If I was going to say listen to one song, I would say like Life Will Change, Last Surprise, like just 10 or 15 good fucking songs just rattling off my head. Persona 5 has such a good soundtrack that even the interstitial stuff sounds good, not even just the main stuff. So the music is so fucking good. The battles are so fucking good. The characters, in most cases, are so fucking good. What could possibly go wrong with this entire game that I've spent an hour gushing over? Well, let's talk about that. Let's get that out of the way. Because, goddamn it, there are some bad things about Persona 5. I will say bad things about Persona 5, even though I don't want to. I don't want to do it! But I talked before about the slow visual novel style. I'm saddened when people try this game and are not aware that it is a visual novel masquerading as an RPG or a JRPG, because it's half and half. And if you're not into the visual novel stuff, if you're just expecting it to be a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest, you're in for a rude awakening. This is what Persona 2, like Persona 3, 4, and 5 have always been. For better or for worse. I like that sort of thing because it gives me time to feed off the characters more, but at the same time, they overdo it. They overdo over-explaining things to get back to the plot, so it's not always perfect. So I can understand why people who like action games are like, well, why am I stopping every, dungeon to spend 2 or 3 in-game hours doing social link stuff with other people just to get to another plot point. So it's like a start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And some people have given up. And it's not just like 1 or 2 people. It's like, 5 or 10 different streamers of Persona just like, no, I don't want to play it. I don't like it. And, that's their business. They're not into it. So again, it takes a certain mindset. If you're into the gameplay loop like I am, you are well rewarded for it. If you're not into this gameplay loop, it is not going to be for you. The mid game of the game, like the Haru thing, is very out of nowhere and really quick. I personally like it, but I've heard a lot of people say that the pacing is kind of shitty because after Haru's dungeon, it does the Persona 4 thing where it gives you like 2 months of nothing to do. Yeah, it does give you like a month or two of nothing to do in between Futaba's and Haru's dungeon, and it's kind of there, because of that gameplay loop. It is go to a dungeon, do the story first, then do the dungeon, then do the social link stuff after the fact. Then we'll give you a little bit more social link stuff to do. Then we'll focus on the story again. So when you're given like an extra month and a half or 2 months even between dungeons, you're sitting there going, that's a lot of storytelling and a lot of social link stuff. Or in the case of like Haru's or Shido's dungeons, they're packing the story so much that it feels like top heavy. So you got a hefty beginning, got stuff in the middle that kind of works but is kind of out of nowhere, and then a shit ton of stuff at the end. But there's always that sense that the social link stuff has to come into play and always gets stuck. So again, it's all about the gameplay loop. That being said, one specific part I didn't like about mid-game was when you finish Futaba's dungeon and she becomes a character in the party. She doesn't talk, but she's not like an invalid. It's not like she doesn't want to talk to people. She just doesn't have anything to talk about. But the party decides without her input to have her open up. And I said this when I did the playthrough. I said, you're not giving her a choice, because this is a forced thing that you have to do. You have to spend 5 to 10 in-game days in cutscene giving Futaba a thing to do. Sure, it gives her a character, but she already did have one. You can splice in her character bit by bit during the story bits. You don't have to force her as a person with probably social anxiety or, just coming off being a fucking shut-in. Hey, let's go out, do a thing. Let's go have her work. Let's go have her go to the beach. Let's have her go do this. It was done for a good reason, but they forced that upon her without her consent. And even Dorkface and Joker, who's supposed to be his, foster brother, I guess, kind of just forces her into the thing because that's what the story said we should do. There's no choice to skip it. So every time you replay this game, you got to go through that sequence over again. And I think it bothered me the first time I did it, but I enjoyed it because of the novelty. But now I've played it like 4 or 5 different times. I'm just like, no, I don't like the fact that you're forcing an opinion or forcing a situation on a person, especially somebody in that situation where she lost her fucking mother in a tragedy, and you're telling her, hey, let's go to a bar, let's go to a thing, let's have her work and clean dishes and work with... No! Let her make her own decision. And it's dumb because it's separate from her social link. It's something that they do to have a beach episode. It's something they do to give Futaba a character outside of, hey, we finished her character arc, now let's give her the in-game, like, this is what she's going to be like as a character as the story progresses. It's dumb. Another thing I didn't like was, as much as I like the stats, I said this before, locking certain segments of social links behind stats, or even locking them behind stats in general. Like, I remember back in Persona 3, you would not be able to date certain characters unless your stats were high enough. Or in Persona 4, where you're trying to deal with Nanako, who's the best character in the game and the best character in the series. Bite me! Nanako's the best girl. But Nanako is trying to talk to you, or you're trying to talk to Nanako, and it says, no, your understanding's not high enough, dumb fuck. You got to get it to level 5. I'm like, I don't wanna. So you're spending like an extra of like 10 or so in-game days trying to level up a stat just to unlock a certain character. So you kind of waste a playthrough trying to build a stat base just to unlock the rest of a social link. Yeah, you could do 100% playthrough, but that would require a guide and kind of take the spontaneity out of the whole experience, because a social link is supposed to be spur of the moment. You're in control of your character. If you follow a guide to give you the best possible ending, it's just following a spreadsheet. So Persona 5 does the same thing. It's like, level up this so Makoto will talk to you, but then your buddy across the table won't look at you like you're some putz because you have no charm. Or whatever, like your understanding or whatever has to be high enough so Futaba will even open up to you, despite the fact that like you're the one she even cares about at all because she's your brother, sort of thing, because you're the one who's always around at the fucking cafe. It's like you need these little like benchmark flags to do these certain things. I get it, but it also, as much as it builds replayability, it's also busy work. But if I was to say one thing that I hate more about any in this game than anything else, it's Ryuji. And I like how he's portrayed. It's not the actor's fault. Fuck no. I like Max Mittelman. He's great. He's a great actor. I haven't seen him in a shit ton of stuff, but it's not the actor's fault. It's the writing that they gave him. In Personas 3 and 4, they've had these slacker characters like Junpei and Yosuke. And Junpei comes off a bit of a dick, but kind of passive-aggressive. Yosuke gets himself in trouble, but he's still kind of like jovial at heart, despite being a bit of a prick. And I will preface this, Ryuji's social link paints him in a decent light, but it's the story. You cannot get away from Ryuji in the story. And every time that it seems like the characters are making a mistake or fighting amongst themselves or getting off track, it's because Ryuji is doing something stupid. They made a conscious effort to make the absolute dirt worst, stupid fucking moron in gaming. And he is my most hated character I've ever experienced. More than Hope in Final Fantasy 13, more than Edward in Final Fantasy 4, more than like Kagome from Inuyasha or shit like that. The dirt worst characters that just have no redeeming qualities. In storyline, Ryuji is like the dumbest, thickest, most agitated, rage-inducing fucking asshole I've ever experienced. And I will give you an example. Well, two specifically. It's not enough that every time something, like they're talking about the metaverse and Ryuji goes, duh, I don't know what that means. Like, shut up. We know you don't know what it means. No, let the big boys talk. Let Makoto and Morgana and Akechi talk about the metaverse because they're not stupid. That's fine. If it was just that, it'd be dumb, but it'd be fine. But he has this thing where he flies off the handle at everybody. Gets the slightest insult, he bitches them out, whether they deserved it or not. And sometimes it leads to good moments, like he's attacking Shido in an elevator, like, oh, so you can fuck with us, but we can't fuck with you. That's double, that sort of thing. He's endearing on the side of like the righteous, but he's a dick about it. But it's not even that. In Makoto's storyline, she is kind of trying to find data and stuff about the Phantom Thieves because the principal told them to. So she's kind of stalking Dorkface. You can see her wandering around with a fucking newspaper, and she's not inconspicuous at all. You see her coming from a mile away. It is the fucking best. She's following you around, and you know that she's following you around. In game, these guys know they're following you around. But Ryuji, because he's a fucking idiot, for the last 5 or 10 hours, has been saying, hey, we're the Phantom Thieves. Isn't it fucking great? Let's go get a girl for it. Like, shouldn't we be, like, taking out the heavy hitters and doing all this fun stuff because we're Phantom Thieves? Isn't Phantom Thieving great? We should do Phantom Thief stuff. Let's do all, he's just up front. He has no subtlety at all about being a Phantom Thief. He thinks being a Phantom Thief will change his fortune for being an absolute fuckhead so that he can get a date. And it doesn't work for him at all. The closest he gets to having a friend is Anne, because they're around each other all the time because they're childhood friends. But even that's not like completely asked upon, but he's slightly pervish and he's annoying about it. So much so that while Makoto is, unbeknownst to us, recording the conversation, Ryuji's talking about, hey, let's go do a Phantom Thief thing. We'll show up at the normal place. And I'm just like, every time he says, hey, let's do a Phantom Thief meeting, I'm like, dude, you're going to get caught. You know that. And then, sure enough, a couple days later, Dorkface gets a call and says, I have this on my phone. I'd like to see you get your way out of this. Could you explain why you had a guy talk about being Phantom Thieves? And yes, you could say Anne got involved too, but for every time Anne talks about it, Ryuji talks about it 10 to 15 times more. Every single time they talk about phantom thieving, it's Ryuji trying to make a fucking bombastic statement about how he's so bored and wants to use phantom thieving as a way to become a popular dork. Because he wants a fucking date. Because he wants to be special. He gets this. He goes with another dork dickhead. He hands us this fucking flyer that says maid service. So he forces Joker and some other dickhead to come to this random house that he knows, and that's how you meet Kawakami. Did I want to do this maid service thing? No. I did it because it was a social link thing, because it's awesome and it's the best social link in the game. But in reality, no. I don't think Joker or anybody would want to talk to fucking pervy maids. But he forces the issue, and that's not even the worst part. So the worst part is the Phantom Thieves getting himself caught, because he outs us every single fucking time because he won't shut the fuck up about it. So a couple dungeons later, we're into Haru's storyline, in the 5th dungeon. And Morgana has been starting to feel down because Futaba is a super class A hacker. She has all this knowledge, and Morgana started to feel like he's a waste of space. And Ryuji calls him on it, and they start getting this little rivalry. And Morgana's, earnest, and he's a bit annoying himself, but in a nice way. He'll poke the bear every once in a while, but he's never like, I'm trying to antagonize you, I'm trying to make you pissed off. Ryuji, though, keeps poking the cat. He keeps poking the cat, saying he's worthless. Keeps saying he's worthless. And Morgana just says, no, fuck off. You're going to call me a worthless piece of shit, despite the fact that I'm your healer, right? Outside of Makoto, he's the only healer in the fucking game, so in-game mechanics-wise, getting rid of your healer is a terrible idea. So now you have Dorkface having to do it. That's stupid. But even as a character, I would prefer Morgana over Ryuji every fucking second. Despite the fact that Morgana tells me to go to sleep every fucking night, he's at least doing me a service. Ryuji's telling me that I'm a phantom thief to every fucking person within a fucking earshot. So the party starts telling Ryuji, look, you gotta apologize. We need Haru in the party because she's the one who can help us with this dungeon that we're doing, but we want to be friends. We want to do this shit. We want to get Morgana back on our side. So what does Ryuji do? He says, I don't care if you're worthless. I still think you're fun, and I don't know if you're a fucking douchebag. And Morgana's just like, oh, you think I'm a putz, do you? Well, fuck off. And the only time he stops, is because Morgana was attacked by that sex offender dude that Haru knows, that fiance, who was abusing her. This guy kicked the cat and against a wall, and they had no choice but to just drop everything. But until that point, Ryuji not only outs us as a phantom thief at every goddamn opportunity for the dumbest fucking reasons that mean nothing to the story, he also antagonizes Morgana to the point where we have to side with Morgana whether we want to or not. And again, this is not talking about Ryuji as a social link. In a social link, he's an endearing dumbass. But in story, any endearing and redeeming qualities are drowned out by the sheer monumental fucking stupidity. And kudos on Persona writers. They wrote this guy to be the absolute dirt worst. But the fact that he's a friend, like, everybody might have a friend like that, but I can't fucking stand him. He's the fucking worst character I've ever experienced. It's awful. It's so bad that it became a fucking meme on my Twitch channel. It became like hashtag blame Ryuji or something, because it was always his fault whenever we had to do something stupid, or whenever there was something dumb that happened in the game where we spent extra dialogue talking about Ryuji, because he's stupid. He's irredeemable. He's an antagonistic, rage-filled dickwad, and it's just awful. So yes, the fact that I like him more than somebody from Final Fantasy 13, who I thought was the fucking worst, I will take Hope 10 times out of 10 over having to deal with somebody like Ryuji ever in my fucking life, much less a fucking video game. Ryuji sucks. Ryuji fucking sucks, and if you like him, that's your own business, but I think you're wrong. Like him if you want. He's got redeeming qualities, but in storyline, he sucks. And I said it. This is the first time I've been pissed off about a thing on a podcast. Ryuji fucking sucks, and I hate him. So, now that I've talked about Ryuji sucking wind for 10 minutes, let's talk about the good stuff. Everything else. The visual design, the music, all of that stuff feeds off each other. When you hear a song, the visuals feed off each other. The HUD in-game looks like a fucking pop graphic. Looks like those fucking, like, Phantom Thief calling card things. Everything's designed in these crazy, amazing whites and reds and blacks, and they just pop the screen. It is amazing. I said before, the quick, snappy battles, anything that reminds me of Final Fantasy X has got me. This is the logical endpoint of that Final Fantasy X, like, you know what everybody's going to be doing, so you fucking do it. You've still got a strategy that you can follow, and it's still pretty difficult, but everybody has their mechanic. Everybody has their little nuance, and everybody can, like, feed off each other, and it builds on each other, and everything you've done in-game leads to being better in combat, and every time you're better in combat, it feeds off other parts in the game, so everything cycles back into each other, but it's all quick, snappy, and designed with absolute precision that it is the closest thing to Final Fantasy X we've had in God knows how long. Yakuza 7's close, but it was their first attempt at it. Persona's been doing this for years, you know, and Atlas was doing a very good job of taking what works and not breaking it. I wish Final Fantasy would take the same fucking advice once of these days, instead of making stuff like Strangers of Paradise and trying to do Kingdom Hearts and trying to do, you know, like, for all the good Final Fantasy VII Remake is, it's not what I'd want out of a battle system, because they already made their best game back in 2002. You're not going to compete with that game. You're just not. So, I'm stuck in my ways. I'll admit it. Final Fantasy X had the best battle system ever, but Persona 5 Royal is about as close as you're going to get as far as a modern game goes. And any game that's close to that, close to these two, in terms of that system, this is what a JRPG battle system should be. And I'm happy that they really managed it. The social links, by and large, are really good. I mean, as good as Makoto is, I don't think her social link is as good as a character. She's great in story, but in social link, maybe not so much. But then you have people like Kawakami, amazing. You've got Futaba, who does all the funny, jokey shit, but still has moments of seriousness. Like, everybody has the serious moment, but it's still like, do you want to do the social link or not? There are only like 2 or 3 social links that don't add up, and by and large, 20 social links succeeding where 1 or 2 don't is a damn good amount. And that's been par for the course with Persona for a long time. A lot of their social links, they put a lot of effort into making them feel good and working well and giving you different things. And then Persona 5 gives you new stats or gives you new abilities or unlocks these new things for you to do because you spent time to do the social links. So you have an in-game reason to doing all that. And what I think, aside from the visuals and the music design, what Persona 5 tends to do very well is keep a darker, more mature tone, despite the fact that it's not as dark as, say, Persona 3. The way I would kind of describe the 3 games, because they all kind of fit in the same umbrella. Persona 3 has the best dark tone and stakes, but weaker in-game design, weaker characters. But if you like the darker tone and you like the higher stakes, you're gonna like Persona 3 more, despite the dated battle system, which I personally I don't mind. I like Persona 3 very much, and I think it's really good in that sense that even Persona 5 can't stack up to, oh my god, this is very like dark and dystopian and shit. Almost like an SMT game, but still in its own lighthearted way. Persona 4, the weakest stakes, but the best characters. And better music than Persona 3. Overall, better music. But again, the story feels more like a Scooby-Doo episode than life or death struggle. Even near the end, you're kind of like, well, this doesn't really seem to be all that threatening, as opposed to this godlike being that seems to be threatening us. But the moments in Persona 4, like King's Game or messing around in an eating contest, these little things where all the main characters and Nanako and all the other people can fuck around and just do random shit. They feel like high school students fucking around, doing nothing on their day off. Like, it feels like it should. Like, they feel together. So they're the best characters, but I don't think in design-wise, as good as Persona 4 is, I don't think it's as good as Persona 5 design-wise, and it's not got 3's darker tone. But Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal is a good meshing of the two. And at the end of the day, what Persona 5 succeeds at more than anything else is reminding me that those old school style games, those 90s style or 80s and 90s style RPGs have not lost their touch. A lot of games now, and I say this about Final Fantasy, but I say this a lot about a lot of games, they're chasing something that's not what I used to know. And I can admit I'm set in my ways, and I'm not into we've got Elden Ring and the Soulsborns and all that stuff, and we've got all the mainstream games like Assassin's Creed and whatever, So Final Fantasy's going, hey, Kingdom Hearts was a good battle system. Let's focus on that and change it up and do all this like westernization shit. And, it does scream kind of strange when Persona 5 and Yakuza are all, we are solely planting our flag in that old school, this is what Dragon Quest was, so we're going to follow it to a T. We're not going to change just because we think we can make a little bit of money. We're going to make our own money, and we're going to make enough money, and we're going to get everybody to like our stuff so we can make more money in the future. So they don't have to follow the same conventions that a lot of other franchises do. And again, every franchise is different. Everything feels different. But for me, coming from what I was growing up when I was starting to enjoy these games into now where I'm solely planting my flag in playing this kind of stuff or watching this kind of stuff, Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal end up feeling like the absolute zenith of what that type of game should be for the modern day. Is it everybody's cup of tea? No. But what Persona does is it is exactly the type of game for me, an anime fan from a different country, learning about a different culture, but still guiding me through a familiar, like, hey, I played these games as a kid. Here's more of it. Here's more of it. Here's everything we're doing. We don't reinvent the wheel. I am not a person that likes reinventing the wheel. And Persona, Dragon Quest, Yakuza, they don't reinvent the wheel. If they do, they're going to fall into the same pitfalls that Final Fantasy tends to do. I do not want that. I am solely in this camp. So if you ever want to know what kind of game I like, it's this. Is it everybody's cup of tea? No, it is very Japanese. To a fault. If you're not into JRPGs, it could be a good interesting start. But it has its own foibles. It is not going to change what it is for you. But it's going to give you as good as it's got. It's going to give you as good a characters, as good a music, as good a story, and as good a battle system as any of these games. And as a complete product, it is my favorite. And that's where I'm staking my claim. I did not play 206 episodes of a fucking playthrough for 100 hours just to not say this was my favorite game. So there you go. But that being said, I have no idea how long this episode's been. I'm going to just wait and find out like everybody else. But I have a special announcement. I've put this on my schedule already, but I'm going to do another theme month, much like I did with Ruby. And this time, I'm going to do .hack. And I'm going to go through both mainline anime and both mainline video games from the 2000s in a month. And it's an interesting project because it feeds off each other, much like all the Ruby episodes did. But it's also its own thing. Because what I wanted to do before starting to get into like one of the things I worry about doing these is I'm going to be like digging into the same franchises over and over, the Final Fantasies, the Personas, the Mega Man, Sonic, Castlevanias. That's going to happen. I took a look at my schedule and I was just like, yeah, eventually I'm just going to be sequel baiting over and over and over, and I'm going to try and feed in some different games here and there. But I still, I wanted to get to something different before I started sequel baiting the hell out of this podcast. So we'll do Dot Hack as its own special thing for the next month. We'll start with what started it all, Dot Hack Sign, one of my first anime I've ever watched. My God, I feel old because it's been 25 years since is it 20? Yeah, 22 some years since I was a fan. It's been 20 years since I first watched anime, and this was one of the first few that I saw. Dot Hack Sign, even now with the whole everything is a world and everything's a video game and everything, it was ahead of its time and it still holds up. But it feeds directly into the first game known as Dot Hack Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine. It's okay. It's an iffy game, but I'll explain why it's still got a place. But then we get into Dot Hack Roots, which opens up Revision 2, version 2 of the world, and then it ends up after Dot Hack Roots into what I consider one of the best PlayStation 2 games of all time, Dot Hack GU. And everything that Dot Hack Sign does, GU and Roots does better. And GU ends up becoming what Dot Hack represents as a franchise. So that's why I really wanted to get into this, is I wanted to re-experience Dot Hack from the beginning again. Sure, there's other anime and video game related stuff, but those are kind of the main four I'm going to focus on. So we're just going to do Dot Hack Sign, Dot Hack Quadrilogy, Dot Hack Roots, and then Dot Hack GU all in a month. After that, it's going to be sequel stuff over and over, I'm sure. But for now, I'll call it here. It's been a very long episode, I'm sure. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be back next week. Citizen Strife, signing off.